The research station on Kiros Prime hummed with the sound of countless machines and the worried voices of scientists from a dozen different species. Kevin Hayes stepped through the airlock and immediately felt the weight of thousands of eyes watching him. Though most of those eyes belonged to beings hidden behind reinforced observation windows and protective barriers, Commander Tall of the Kyrthian Empire stood in the central command hub. His forearms folded across his chest in a gesture that Kevin had learned meant deep concern. His scales, normally a calm shade of blue, had shifted to a nervous purple hue. The commander had been briefed on Kevin's arrival 3 hours ago, and Kevin could see that the briefing had not gone well. "The human wishes to do what exactly?" Tall said, his voice carrying the musical tones of his native language through the translation device. "I want to observe them," Kevin replied, his American accent somehow sounding thin and inadequate in this place so far from home. "I want to understand their behavior patterns before we make any decisions about containment or disposal." Demira from the Centauri Collective approached from the side, her crystalline body reflecting the harsh station lights in 1,000 tiny rainbows. "Kevin, we have lost 12 researchers already. The creatures show no signs of intelligence. Only aggression, only the need to destroy." Kevin had read the reports during his long journey across the stars. He had studied the footage, watched the recordings of previous expeditions, and seen the data that everyone in the galaxy had come to fear. The 3 creatures imprisoned in the deep containment level below them were legendary. They had names in 100 languages. But all those names meant the same thing: death, destruction. Nightmares made flesh. The nightmares of Vex were 12 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted between deep purple and black depending on how the light hit them. Each creature had multiple eyes arranged in patterns that seemed almost designed to inspire terror. Those eyes glowed a deep red, like cooling metal fresh from a forge. Their claws could pierce through starship hulls, and their teeth were arranged in rows that suggested a predatory evolution spanning millions of years. "I understand the risks," Kevin said quietly. He could feel the fear radiating from both of them, even though they came from species that had conquered half the galaxy and bent entire star systems to their will. When humans looked afraid, Kevin had learned, it usually meant they were about to die today. It meant they thought he was about to die. "The containment fields are holding them in the observation chamber," Commander Tal said, his tone suggesting he still could not believe this conversation was happening. "They have not been fed in 3 days. Though we attempted it twice, they attacked the delivery systems both times we removed the food." The hunger and frustration seemed to have made them more aggressive rather than less. Kevin nodded slowly and moved toward the access elevator that would take him down to the lower levels. The elevator descended through the heart of the station, moving through deck after deck of laboratories and monitoring stations. Finally, it opened onto the observation level, and Kevin stepped out into air that seemed colder than it had been moments before. The observation chamber was massive, easily the size of a small sports arena from Earth. The walls glowed with the soft blue light of the containment fields, and beyond those fields, Kevin could see them. The largest creature stood near the far wall, pacing with the restless energy of a caged predator. Its scales caught the light of the containment field and threw it back in waves of dark purple and black. The creature was breathing heavily, and Kevin could see the tension in its muscles. The way its claws scraped against the floor with a sound that made his human teeth ache. The second creature was leaner, faster looking, with visible scars running across its body. These scars told stories of violence and survival, of battles fought in places Kevin could barely imagine. The creature moved with the precision of something that had learned to hunt in a harsh world. It stopped pacing when it sensed Kevin's presence and turned its multiple eyes toward him. The third creature was smaller, than the other two, but seemed somehow more aware. Its eyes tracked Kevin's every movement, with an intelligence that made Kevin's heart beat faster. This was the dangerous one. He realized this was the one that understood what was happening. Kevin moved slowly toward the observation window that looked into the chamber. He moved with purpose, but without haste. Making no sudden movements, making no sounds, he breathed deeply and evenly, allowing his body to relax, even as his mind raced with calculations and theories and desperate hope. The creatures reacted to his approach. The largest one reared back, its claws scraping at the air. The second one hissed, a sound like superheated steam escaping from a ruptured pipe. The third one, the smallest and most intelligent, simply watched behind the reinforced barriers of the observation area. Kevin could hear the sounds of weapons being drawn and emergency protocols being activated. He could feel Commander Tal's finger hovering over the trigger of some device. Kevin did not want a name. He could sense the readiness of the entire station to flood this chamber with sedatives or poison or whatever it took to preserve the life of one insignificant human. But Kevin did not turn away. He did not flee. He did not scream. Instead, Kevin spoke, his voice low and calm and filled with a certainty he did not entirely feel. "I know you are afraid," he said to the creatures on the other side of the containment field. "I know that fear is the only thing you have known for a very long time. I know that you have been hunted and caged and studied and threatened, and that every being who has come near you has done so with the intention of causing you harm." The creatures paused. They seemed to be listening. "But I am not here to hurt you," Kevin continued, taking a step closer to the observation window. "I am here to try to understand. You are not monsters. You are not the nightmare the galaxy thinks you are. You are just survivors, like all of us, just trying to make sense of a world that has been cruel to you." The largest creature stopped its pacing. The second creature's hiss faded into silence. The third one, the intelligent one, lowered its massive head slightly, as if an acknowledgement of truth being spoken. "I am going to go into the chamber with you," Kevin said to the creatures and to the panicked voices on the other side of the observation window. "And nothing you do to me will change the way I see you. I see your pain. I see your intelligence. I see the beings you really are beneath all that fear and all that rage." He moved toward the chamber entrance, and behind him, Commander Tal's voice rose in protest and alarm. But Kevin did not hesitate. He had come across the stars to understand these creatures, and he would not turn back now, not when he could feel that some part of them wanted so desperately to be understood. Kevin's hand rose slowly, palm outward, displaying no weapon, no threat, nothing but the open vulnerability of a human being choosing to trust. The scarred creature watched his hand approach, its multiple eyes tracking every inch of movement, every shift in Kevin's body language. The creature could have killed him in an instant, could have lashed out with its claws and ended the human's life before anyone in the observation area could respond. Instead, the creature stood still. Kevin's fingers made contact with the creature's scales, and the texture was not what he expected. It was not cold and reptilian and alien, but warm, almost pulsing with life, covered in a fine layer of what felt almost like silk beneath the harder outer coating of protective scales. Kevin's smile came naturally then, a genuine expression of relief and wonder and connection. "Hello," Kevin whispered, and he began to stroke the creature's scaled chest in slow, gentle motions. The creature's breathing changed, became slower, deeper, more controlled. The tension that had been coiled in its muscles began to unwind like a spring finally allowed to release its pressure. The largest creature watched this interaction with an intensity that suggested processing new information, re-evaluating everything it believed about the humans that had entered its life, before the observers in the station could fully comprehend what was happening. The massive creature moved toward Kevin, not with aggression, but with curiosity, its enormous head lowered. And Kevin reached up with his other hand to touch the creature's scaled face. "You are magnificent," Kevin said, and his voice carried the weight of absolute truth. He was not performing for the observers behind the barriers. He was not following a plan. He was simply speaking to the being in front of him, acknowledging its existence, its intelligence, its profound and undeniable presence. Kevin moved his hands across the creature's face, finding the sensitive areas between the eyes where the scales were slightly softer, where the creature's breathing changed with each touch. The creature made a sound, a long, low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the entire chamber. The sound was not aggressive or threatening. It was something else entirely, something that Kevin's exhausted but triumphant mind recognized as contentment, perhaps even pleasure. The creature was leaning into the touch, actively seeking more contact, like a house pet that had finally found someone willing to provide affection. The scarred creature remained close, and Kevin extended his hand to it, stroking along the length of its body, following the valleys and ridges of scars that mapped out a history of survival and struggle. "You are a warrior," Kevin said to the scarred one, and he felt the creature's muscles relax beneath his touch. "You have survived so much, and you have never given up, even when the entire universe seemed designed to destroy you." The smallest creature approached now, the intelligent one, the one that had understood from the beginning that Kevin was different. The creature made a series of sounds, complex and varied, almost like music or language filtered through an alien vocal structure. Kevin reached up and touched the sensitive area between the creature's forward-facing eyes, and the creature closed several of its eyes in a gesture that could only be described as bliss in that moment. Surrounded by 3 legendary nightmares, Kevin understood something that would later change the entire trajectory of galactic civilization. These creatures were not monsters. They were beings that had been treated as monsters for so long that they had no choice but to act the part. They were traumatized, hurt, desperate, alone. But beneath all of that was an infinite capacity for connection, for gratitude, for love. Kevin continued to stroke and pet the creatures, moving from one to the other, ensuring that each received affection and acknowledgement. His hands grew warm from contact with their scaled bodies. His heart, which had been racing with fear and adrenaline, began to settle into a steady rhythm of peace and purpose. The creatures gathered around him now, no longer distant, no longer threatening, but close, intimate, seeking his touch like they had been deprived of it their entire lives. Perhaps they had been. Kevin thought about the records he had read, about the isolation and confinement, about the absence of any being that had ever offered them gentleness or kindness. These creatures had never known touch except as violence, never known contact except as pain. "I see you," Kevin said softly, his hands moving across their scales, his presence warm and certain in the midst of creatures that the galaxy feared. "I see what you really are, and you are beautiful." The largest creature rested its enormous head on Kevin's shoulder, and a human embraced it as much as one human could embrace a creature that weighed tons and stood twice as tall. The scarred creature pressed against Kevin's side. The intelligent one lowered its head to rest against Kevin's chest in the observation area. Every scientist was frozen in shock. Dr. Mara's crystalline form was glowing so brightly it was almost blinding. Commander Tal had lowered his weapon, his forearms hanging loose at his sides, his mind struggling to process what the sensors were telling him, what the visual feeds were showing, what was happening in direct contradiction to everything his years of experience had taught him. A human was standing unharmed among 3 legendary monsters, petting them, speaking to them softly, and the creatures were responding not with aggression, but with what could only be described as love. The entire foundation of everything the Galactic Council believed about these creatures, about the nature of the threat they represented, was crumbling in real time. Kevin closed his eyes and held the creatures close, offering them the one thing the universe had denied them: peace, acceptance, the simple acknowledgement that they were worthy of care and affection. It was not a solution to the galaxy's problems. It was not a weapon or a strategy or a clever political move. It was something far more powerful. It was hope made manifest in the gentleness of a human hand and the warmth of a human heart. The containment field flickered as Kevin passed through it, and immediately the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Kevin could feel the cold presence of the creatures, could sense their attention focusing on him with the intensity of 3 spotlights converging on a single point. The air itself seemed to become heavier, more difficult to breathe. The largest creature advanced toward him, its movement swift and purposeful despite its enormous size. Kevin estimated it weighed nearly 2 tons, perhaps more, and every bit of that weight was muscle and predatory purpose. The creature's claws extended, each one the length of Kevin's forearm, and its mouth opened to reveal rows of teeth that seemed designed by evolution specifically to cause maximum damage. Kevin did not run. He did not raise his hands in panic or try to scramble backward toward the safety of the containment field. He simply stood still and continued to breathe, his heart hammering in his chest, but his face remaining calm and his body language remaining peaceful. "I understand you are angry," Kevin said softly to the approaching creature. "I understand that you have learned to meet fear with violence, because that is the only response that has kept you alive, but I'm not afraid of you. I am only sad for what has been done to you." The creature paused, its claws only a few feet away from Kevin's body. The silence in that moment seemed to stretch into eternity. Kevin could hear the sound of his own breathing, could hear the hum of the containment field around him, could hear the frantic sounds of activity from the observation area as the alien scientists scrambled to respond to this impossible situation behind the reinforced barriers. Kevin knew that Commander Tal was staring at him in disbelief. Damira's crystalline form was probably glowing with anxiety and fear. Everyone in the Tuesday station was watching a human stand before a legendary monster and wait to see if he would be torn apart. The second creature circled Kevin, moving with the grace of something designed by evolution to hunt in harsh terrain. Its scarred body moved silently, and Kevin could see the intelligence in its multiple eyes. This one had survived more than the others, and learned how to move through danger with skill and awareness. Kevin turned slightly, keeping the creature in his vision, and continued to speak in that same soft, calm voice. "You have scars that tell stories," Kevin said to the scarred creature. "Each one of those marks represents a battle you fought, a challenge you survived. I wonder how many times you have stood on the edge of death and chosen to fight. Instead of surrender, I wonder how strong you must be, not just in your body but in your spirit." The smallest creature approached from the side, moving with a grace that suggested intelligence and calculation. This one was different from the other two. Kevin realized this one seemed to understand something about Kevin's intentions, seemed to grasp that this human was not following the script that all the other beings in its life had followed. "You," Kevin said, directing his attention to the smallest creature. "You are the one that understands language, that grasps concepts beyond simple food and threat and survival. You are the one who has thought about why you are here and what it means. I can see it in how you move, in the way you observe me. I am grateful that you are listening." The smallest creature paused and lowered its head slightly. It made a sound, low and rumbling, that echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. The other two creatures seemed to respond to this sound, their aggressive postures easing marginally. Kevin could feel sweat running down his temples despite the cool air of the chamber. His hands were shaking slightly. Though he kept them steady and visible to the creatures, he knew that sudden movements could trigger an attack. that his body's fear response could betray him at any moment. But he pressed forward anyway. "I have read the reports," Kevin continued, moving slowly through the chamber so that he positioned himself not directly beneath the largest creature, but rather in a space between all three. "I have seen the data from what was done to you before you came to this station. The records show that you were created, engineered, designed by a civilization that wanted weapons." He paused, allowing that thought to settle. "But you are not weapons, you are beings. You have emotions and memories and the capacity to suffer and the capacity to hope." The largest creature dropped its claws slightly. The second creature stopped its circling and simply watched the smallest creature make another low sound. And this time, Kevin heard something in that sound that almost resembled acknowledgement. Kevin continued to speak, filling the silence with his voice, with his presence, with his refusal to be afraid. "The universe is full of species that have learned to survive through violence and dominance, that have built empires on the backs of conquered worlds and enslaved peoples. But humans, we come from a world that taught us something different. We come from a world where a small creature can show kindness to a large creature. And somehow the kindness means more than all the weapons ever created." The creatures were listening now, really listening. And Kevin could feel something shifting in the chamber. Some fundamental change in the dynamic between hunter and hunted. "I believe that you want to be understood," Kevin said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I believe that beneath all the fear and the rage and the trauma, there is a being that wants someone to look at you and see you not as a monster, not as a weapon, but as a person. I am going to try to do that. I am going to try to see who you really are. And then, without overthinking it, without allowing fear to paralyze him, Kevin did something that no being in the galaxy had thought to do before. He took a step forward, closing the distance to the nearest creature, the scarred one that had survived so much and learned so much. The alien scientists behind the observation window were probably screaming. His death was probably being documented on 1,000 recording devices. His final moments were about to be broadcast across the known galaxy as a warning to all humanity. But Kevin did not think about any of that. He thought only about the creature in front of him and the possibility that beneath all that fear and all that rage, there might be a being that simply wanted to be touched, wanted to be acknowledged, wanted someone to care that it existed. Kevin emerged from the containment chamber after nearly 3 hours inside with the creatures. The moment he stepped back through the barrier, medical teams surrounded him, scanning his body for injuries, checking his vital signs. Seeming shocked to discover that he had not been harmed, the creatures remained calm, watching Kevin's departure with an almost sorrowful resignation, as if they were afraid he would not return. Commander Tal approached Kevin before the medical team could complete their examination. His forearms were trembling slightly, and his scales had faded to a pale blue that suggested profound emotional disturbance. "What just happened in there?" Tal said, his voice struggling to form the words. "That was not possible. That contradicts every single report, every prediction, every model we created to understand those creatures. They are afraid," Kevin said simply, still breathing heavily from the intensity of the experience. "Everything they do, every aggressive act, every moment of rage, it all comes from fear. You feel fear when something threatens your survival. And these creatures have spent their existence being threatened." Dr. Myra joined them, her crystalline form dimmed to a soft glow of puzzlement. "We conducted advanced scans during your time inside the chamber," she said, gesturing to the data streaming across nearby monitors. "The readings we obtained are disturbing, Kevin. Those creatures show signs of systematic torture. Their bodies bear markers of deliberate trauma, controlled starvation, repeated injection of chemical compounds that we believe were designed to enhance aggression and reduce higher cognitive function. Kevin felt his stomach tighten. He looked back through the observation window at the three creatures, now sitting quietly in the chamber, watching the activity around them with patient intelligence. Where did they come from? He asked quietly. Who brought them here? That is the question that has consumed galactic historians for 3 centuries, Commander Tal said. According to the oldest records, these creatures were created approximately 5,000 years ago by the Zener Empire, a civilization that achieved remarkable technological advancement before collapsing mysteriously. The Zener created many bioweapons, but these 3 were the most successful, the most deadly, the most feared by the time the Zener civilization fell. These creatures had already spread through several star systems, destroying entire colonies. Or were they destroying colonies because they were being hunted? Kevin said, moving toward the data displays Dr. Mira had been examining. He studied the scans, looking at the detailed information about the creature's physical composition. Look at the neurological structure. Every predator in the galaxy has aggressive regions in their brain. But these creatures are not just naturally aggressive. The scan shows evidence of surgical alteration, modification, the insertion of aggressive impulses that the creatures would not normally possess. Donna Myra's form brightened slightly as she understood what Kevin was suggesting. You were saying that their violence is not inherent. They are not monsters by nature. I am saying that they were made to be monsters. Kevin replied, someone, the Zener or someone after them, deliberately engineered these creatures to be weapons and then amplified their violent tendencies through direct neural manipulation and trauma. They were never given a chance to be anything else. Commander Tal was quiet for a long moment, and Kevin could see the struggle happening behind the commander's eyes. The worldview that had guided him through his military career, the assumptions that had shaped his understanding of these creatures, were being dismantled piece by piece. The question becomes, Tal said finally, what do we do with this information? What do we do with them? We heal them. Kevin said without hesitation, we remove the artificial aggressive programming, provide them with medical care for the trauma they have endured, and we give them something that no being in their lives has ever given them. We give them the choice to be something other than weapons. We give them peace over the following weeks. Kevin worked with Dr. Mira and a growing team of xenopsychologists to develop treatment protocols. The creatures were transferred from the containment chamber to a medical facility that was designed for care rather than imprisonment. The artificial aggressive programming was carefully removed from their neural pathways, a procedure that required extraordinary precision and patience. The creature's medical records were compiled and analyzed, revealing the full extent of the abuse they had endured. Each scar on the scarred creature's body corresponded to a documented incident of violence. Against it, records showed attacks by military forces, experiments conducted by researchers, confinement in ever smaller spaces as the creature grew larger. The scarred one had survived because it had learned to anticipate danger, to move faster, to fight harder. But beneath all that survival instinct was a being that should never have been forced to develop such skills. The largest creature's records showed something different. It was the first of the 3 to be created, and the records documenting its early years were filled with notes about its intelligence, its remarkable problem-solving abilities, its capacity for complex thought. These early records were written before the aggressive programming had been fully installed, before the trauma had accumulated, and they spoke of a being that was naturally curious, naturally social, naturally inclined toward cooperation rather than violence. The smallest, the intelligent one, had been engineered deliberately to be a leader to the others, but to be completely subservient to the Zener masters. The records showed that it had spent centuries resisting this programming, developing a form of mental rebellion that manifested as the philosophical questions Kevin could see in its eyes. Every interaction Kevin had with the smallest creature revealed another layer of intelligence, another indication that this being had spent its long life thinking deeply about its existence and its suffering. As the creatures healed, their personalities emerged. They became calmer, gentler, but also more expressive. They began to make complex sounds that Dr. Myra identified as attempts at communication, attempts to express thoughts and emotions that had been suppressed for far too long. Kevin spent hours with them, simply listening, simply being present, and slowly understanding that these creatures had profound things to say. Profound observations about suffering and survival and the possibility of redemption. Commander Tal watched this transformation, and Kevin could see the internal conflict playing across his face. The commander had built his career on the assumption that these creatures were inherently dangerous, inherently monstrous. Now he was being forced to confront the possibility that he had been wrong, that the beings he had feared were actually victims, actually deserving of protection rather than destruction. In a moment of profound honesty, Tal approached Kevin one evening and said, "We were so afraid that we forgot to consider what we should actually fear. It was not them, it was what we did to them." The message Kevin sent to the Galactic Council was simple. Just a few recorded minutes of him standing with the three creatures, his hands moving gently across their scales, the creatures responding with sounds that could only be described as contentment and affection. The message contained no dramatic speeches, no advanced scientific explanations, no complex political arguments. It was simply a human, showing compassion to beings the galaxy had written off as monsters. The response from the galactic community was immediate and overwhelming. The message spread through communication networks faster than anyone had anticipated. By the time Kevin finished his first week of interviews discussing his breakthrough, the story of the human who had chosen kindness over fear had reached every major civilization in the known galaxy. Species that had dismissed humanity as a primitive, insignificant people suddenly began to reconsider. They began to wonder what other forms of intelligence they had been blind to, what other beings they had misjudged based on fear, rather than understanding. News organizations from dozens of worlds sent reporters to Kairos Prime to document the transformation of the three creatures as they healed and regained their sense of self. The scarred one, which had been called the Destroyer in military records, became known as the Seeker because of its newly demonstrated capacity for curiosity and exploration. The largest creature, engineered as a weapon of mass destruction, revealed itself to be a philosopher of remarkable depth, capable of expressing complex ideas through the new communication system that Dr. Myra had developed. The smallest one, the intelligent one, turned out to be a natural teacher, eager to share knowledge and insights with anyone willing to listen. Universities across the galaxy began to request Kevin's presence to explain his methodology to students and researchers. A new field of study emerged, one that focused on understanding trauma in alien species and developing compassionate approaches to interaction. Instead of military responses, the Hayes Doctrine, as it came to be called, outlined principles for first contact with unknown species that prioritized peaceful interaction, assumed the capacity for reasoning and emotion in all intelligent beings, and rejected the assumption that fear should be the primary driver of decision-making. But perhaps the most significant changes came from governments and military organizations that began to implement Kevin's principles in their own diplomatic efforts. A conflict that had been threatening to erupt into war between two alien empires was diffused when negotiators, trained in the Hayes Doctrine, recognized that the aggression of one side was rooted in historical trauma, rather than inherent hostility. The recovery of a lost colony whose inhabitants had been thought dead was achieved when peaceful contact based on Kevin's principles was established with the beings who had taken shelter on that world. Kevin continued his work on Kiros Prime, even as he received invitations from across the galaxy to conduct similar interventions with other difficult situations. The three creatures became ambassadors of sorts, traveling to different worlds to speak to leaders and citizens about the power of compassion, about the capacity for healing that exists even in the most damaged and traumatized beings. Their story inspired hundreds of similar projects, rehabilitation programs for aggressive species, and funding for xenopsychological research 5 years after Kevin first entered the containment chamber. A permanent sanctuary was established on a world called Haven Mist. The planet was lush and abundant, with ecosystems designed to support multiple species. The three creatures were brought there, not as prisoners or exhibits, but as residents with full autonomy over their existence. A team of researchers, engineers, and caretakers worked to develop the sanctuary into a place where the creatures could thrive, where younger members of their species could be born and raised in an environment free from the trauma and abuse that had shaped their predecessors. Kevin visited the sanctuary regularly, though he began to spend more of his time traveling among the stars, responding to requests from worlds seeking guidance on their most difficult problems. A young Zentari researcher named Sol took over much of the day-to-day management of the sanctuary, continuing the work that Kevin had begun. The work of healing was ongoing, constant, requiring patience and dedication, but also bringing rewards that no military victory could ever provide. On one of his visits to Haven Mist, Kevin stood with the three creatures at sunset on a cliff overlooking a vast valley. The scarred one, now fully healed and bearing the name the Seeker among the community, rested its head on Kevin's shoulder. The philosopher, as the largest creature had become known, stood nearby with an expression that suggested profound contemplation. The teacher, the intelligent one, was interacting with three younger members of their species, passing on knowledge and wisdom. They are teaching, Kevin said to Sol, who stood nearby, observing. The younger ones did not experience the trauma that shaped these three, but they will learn from them. They will understand that their kind is capable of more than violence, that they have value beyond their capacity to destroy. The galaxy is changing because of what you showed us, Sol replied, its crystalline form glowing softly in the dimming light. Not just because of what these creatures can do or teach, but because you demonstrated that we were capable of being wrong, that we were capable of letting fear cloud our judgment, and that we were capable of choosing a different path. Kevin thought about Earth, about the struggles that humanity had endured on that harsh world, about how those struggles had taught humans to recognize suffering in others, to feel empathy across the divide of difference, to refuse to let terror have the final word. He thought about how his ancestors on that distant world had learned, slowly and imperfectly, to build bridges across seemingly impossible gaps, and how that capacity had finally brought humanity something of value to offer the greater galactic community. The sun continued to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of deep orange and purple. The creatures gathered around Kevin, seeking and giving comfort, existing in a moment of peace that they had earned through their own resilience and through the choice of one human to see their suffering and respond with compassion in that moment. Kevin understood that this was only the beginning. The real work of healing was just starting to ripple through galactic civilization. The precedent had been set. The path had been illuminated, but it would take countless beings, countless small acts of compassion and understanding, to fully transform how the galaxy treated its most vulnerable and most misunderstood inhabitants. And yet, as Kevin looked at the three creatures that the galaxy had written off as nightmares, as he felt their warm scales beneath his hands, As he heard the sounds they made that suggested gratitude and connection, and the profound joy of finally being seen and valued for what they truly were. He believed that transformation was possible. He believed that a species that had known only fear and pain could learn to know peace. He believed that compassion was not weakness, but the greatest strength any being could possess, and he believed that humanity, for all its flaws and limitations, had something profound to contribute to the future of galactic civilization. It was not military might or technological superiority. It was the simple refusal to let fear have the final say.